As Israel's genocide against the Palestinian people of Gaza drags on into its second year, the future of Gaza Strip remains uncertain. Despite the continued devastation wrought by the Israeli occupation forces, Israeli leaders were set to meet to discuss the post-war scenario. But the meeting was cancelled. With more than 150,000 Palestinians dead or wounded and no end in sight to the relentless bombings, what are Israel's true plans for Gaza? Deep internal divisions continue to plague Israel's government, from the resignation of former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant to the extreme pressures within Netanyahu's coalition. As Israel insists on an alternative to Hamas rule, we ask, is Israel determined to pursue its objectives of total destruction? And what does the future hold for Gaza and its people? Welcome to In Depth. As Palestinians struggle with a harsh winter, Israeli occupation forces continue to bomb the humanitarian zone of Al-Mawasi in southern Gaza. Israeli occupation forces confirmed it carried out strikes targeting a tent encampment sheltering displaced families in the southern Gaza Strip in the early hours of today. According to medics, civilians, including women and children, were killed in a tent in Al-Mawasi, which was designated as a humanitarian zone for civilians earlier in the war. After weeks of optimism around a potential ceasefire deal, talks have ground to a halt, according to multiple Israeli officials. According to the Times of Israel, a security cabinet meeting that aimed to discuss the day after in Gaza has been cancelled. Speaking on Wednesday during a visit to the southern city of Netivot, Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz threatened Hamas with blows with a force not seen in Gaza for a long time if it continues to fire at Israeli communities. And for more analysis, we're joined from Ramallah with Mr. Omar El-Ghoul, a member of the Central Council of the Palestinian Liberation Organization. A very good day, sir, and a warm welcome to our program. Mr. El-Ghoul, given the current stalemate, do you think Israel has any feasible plans for the future of Gaza in 2025? And what are these plans likely to look like?
Up till this moment, we are talking about we have no horizons, and Benjamin Netanyahu's government is to continue the mass genocide throughout Palestine, in particular in the enclave, for the 54th day, and we've already exceeded the 15th month of genocide. Yet, I've just noted there is no signs of making an exchange of detainees between the Israelis and the Palestinians, as Netanyahu's government don't intend to make the deal. And I think that several of the news channels and several media platforms internationally and in Palestine argue that Benjamin Netanyahu will continue up till the elected president Donald Trump take his post in the 20th of January, and to overcome the taking the presidency of the United States of America in the White House, as he stated in several statements with the Minister of Finance, Jim Rich, assured even if a deal were made of the exchange of the detainees, the war will continue. I mean, he isn't going to stop, Benjamin Netanyahu, at the signing the 60 days of truce, less or more. Therefore, he's going to, according to his plans, even what he claims as achievement, the full victory. Hence, I do not think that the matters are very clear until this moment in the political path of Israel, especially that the current government has a clear direction to continue on the mass genocide. Not this only, but several of them, in particular the advocates of the religious Zionism, is to regain this settlement in the enclave, according to the statements of Trump, and talks about the necessity of putting an end to the war before taking Donald Trump the post of in Washington. But it is early to predict or forecast of what the upcoming days will bear. But I personally, I wish to say that the U.S. administration, upon taking office, intends to put an end in the war.
Okay, sir, I just want you at this point to just comment and tell you that it's not about detainees exchange or the release of the detainees from Benjamin Netanyahu's point of view, because it did not start on the 7th of October of the year 2023. It's been decades and decades, sir, and genocides and apartheids. And now I move on to welcome Mr. Meher Safi from Gaza, a political analyst. A very good day, sir, as we begin 2025. Many observers are wondering whether Gaza will see the end of this brutal war in the near future. Given the ongoing escalation of attacks by the IOF, what are your expectations for the war's future in Gaza, sir? Will it continue throughout 2025?
Good afternoon to you all. The landscape is very clear since the dawn of today and the day before yesterday. Within the past week, the IDF intensifies their attacks throughout Gaza. Today we've already seen massacres, whether in the north, in the south. Israel is to continue in its methodology since the 7th of October up till now. There is no signs of solution. Benjamin Netanyahu does not wish to end the war, and he knows very well that upon the end of the war, his political future will come to an end. And what's happening now, it's a process of the implementation of the general's plans in Gaza and to be focused in several areas in the clave. This is that we see currently continuous massacres by the IDF. Netanyahu did not wish to make negotiation, and he's already ruled for all the Gazan people to be killed since the first day of the war. What he only thinks is that his cabinet to be continued and as saying that they never achieved yet the absolute war goals and to eradicate the Hamas. In return, negotiations are the only and sole solution. And otherwise, there will be more massacres to be committed in Gaza. The whole problem on the shoulder of Netanyahu, even if there is a deal, that the Israeli army will return to bombard Gaza once again. And this is very clear through the statements of the Israeli military leaders, and the war isn't going to stop and to continue to eradicate Hamas. And what we can notice is that the civilians are the main goal of the Israelis of the war in Gaza.
Mr. El-Ghul, the current Israeli government led by Netanyahu seems divided internally, especially, sir, with figures like Yoav Gallant resigning. How do these internal divisions impact Israel's strategy in Gaza at this point, sir?
They do not listen to any types of oppositions.
No, they don't, sir.
As they proved by saying that the current cabinet had presided by Netanyahu to end the war or to accept the deal and the release of the Israeli detainees. And there is an internal pressure upon Israel from the opposition. Yet, for Netanyahu, he thinks that this is a fall or a setback for him if he returned to retaliate about his main goals. Therefore, the opposition in Israel unfortunately never succeeded in full pressure upon Netanyahu, as Netanyahu wanted to continue the massacres and achieve the absolute war goals, as said. So he does not listen to the others, nor to the opposition, the families of the Israeli detainees on demanding, and they're protesting in Israel. He does not listen to any talks coming from mediators, whether they are Arab or American, but he insists to implement the planned displacement in Gaza. All these are agendas need to be implemented by Netanyahu in order to implement either the old or new plans. And therefore, Trump's new administration isn't going to make any effect or will continue, and Netanyahu has the only solution to put an end for everything.
Mr. El-Ghul, following the resignation of former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, how do you assess the internal divisions within Israel's leadership, and do you believe these rifts will hinder or accelerate Israel's military and political objectives in Gaza?
As you know, the internal division within the current coalition has already started since the first moment of the mass genocide following the 7th of October. There was divisions of point of views between the military and the military wings, and between the opposition's forces as well as the families of the Israeli detainees. Although Benjamin Netanyahu has managed to let the military follow his own policies, and Gallant has already announced, and as well as Halipi, the chief of staff, and others of the leaders of the Israeli security forces who were sent to negotiate regarding the hostages deal, and they were in favor of making the deals, but each time is to open horizons of making the deal of the hostages, deals. Netanyahu is just using a card of his hands to put the hinders and obstacles, including the message who sent to the US president.
Yes, sir, he is putting the obstacles. I'll leave it there. Mr. Safi, Israel's government has made it clear it wants to find an alternative to Hamas in Gaza. From a Palestinian perspective, what would be the implications of such a move, and what alternatives to Hamas rule could be acceptable to Palestinians?
Israel is trying to take out of Hamas of what is coming the next day after the war. Netanyahu's plan is to have Palestine free of Hamas in the next day of the war. So that's why he's making reluctant about making the deal. It's the next day following the war, according to his personal future, as said, or rather stated by the Israeli papers, that Hamas has already returned to or resumed his powers once again, and maybe the Community Support Committee that was sponsored by the Arab Republic of Egypt were present in the next day of the war will be formed, whether they are factions or businessmen or factions that are not affiliated to the Islamic wing, and specifically Hamas movement. And therefore the next day of the war is a dilemma for the Israelis, is to have Hamas in the picture. But what is expected of the next day of the war? Hamas will have no main role, but the main role will be shouldered by the government, and that probably will be having an approval of the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, and therefore there is some sort of unity in the next day of the war regarding the support committee, that it is expected to have a role whether in the health or in the reconstruction or in the corruption, as Rafah is the corruption one will have the great focus, as well as the education and the hospital construction. Therefore, I do not see a role for Hamas in the next day of the war, but there is some concerns for Netanyahu of seeing Hamas in the role, and will affirm his failure in the war. And
it's not about Hamas, sir. It's not about Hezbollah. It's not about anything. It's about Benjamin Netanyahu and the idea of changing the Middle East map and continuing his genocides and atrocities in the Gaza Strip and in southern Lebanon, and violating, sir, the ceasefire that was supposed to take place in 60 days. Mr. Al-Ghul, internal political pressures within Israel, such as the role of far-right groups and the resignation of key political figures, seem to be complicating Israel's decisions. How might these factors influence Israel's approach, especially with respect to detainees, in any potential ceasefire, sir?
You supposedly know, and everybody, that Benjamin Netanyahu has already used the pretext of hostages since the beginning to continue the genocide. For the governing coalition, they consider the hostages as already been dead, as stated by Ben Gvir and Smotrich in the beginning, and even Netanyahu within the closed door, as announced by one of the Qnews members in the Likud, as quoting that Netanyahu is not paying too much concern of releasing hostages, but he considering that they are the victims of the genocide, and he is even trading with them and trying to extend the terms of the war, and he is or does not wish to release them. This would affect even the far right wing in Israel is going to be ended, but there are factors up till this moment. The internal factors never managed to turn over to Netanyahu's perspective or opinion and to return him to the negotiation table and to make the deeds that would benefit the release of the hostages and put an end to the war. But also he's going forward to achieve his personal and ideological objectives in the meantime. And as you've mentioned, with respect to the far-wing right, is pursued to resume the settlement, but this would goes in line with the American proposal to end the war before Trump taking office.
Mr. Ghul, all respect, of course, to your narrative, which is worth all respect. Mr. Safi, do you think that Trump will be able to do what the Biden administration was not able to do, which is to stop this war? Especially, we are only about 18 days away from the inauguration, sir.
I do not see this. I do not foresee that the upcoming President Trump to have a direct role in making the deal. And therefore, as you already mentioned before, that Netanyahu would only want to decide when and how the deal will be made. The deal will about to be executed. But as always, Netanyahu is coming out by laying out on a crippled conditions, and I think that such a condition could be overcome in a bid to release the hostages, as Netanyahu is not paying too much concern about Netanyahu. And I think that Trump also hint to threats to Hamas as well as the Middle East region. It could be a solution in the upcoming days, but in the war, and I doubt that Trump will be having a role to put an end of the war in Gaza, but the ideology and the shaping the reality of Gaza and the Palestinian territories in light of the Israeli government and the limitless support of America, and therefore I think that the matters are too much sophisticated.
Meher Saif, 18 days before the inauguration of U.S.-elect President Donald Trump, and everything will be on the table, and we're going to be watching and witnessing what's going to be taking place in Gaza. That was Meher Selfie, political analyst, joining us from Gaza. And from Ramallah, Omar El Ghoul, member of the Central Council of the Palestinian Liberation Organization. Thank you so much for your informative knowledge and insights. That brings us to the end of today's episode of In Depth. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for more updates on Qnews.